In the heart of an upscale shopping district, where glass storefronts gleamed under the afternoon sun and the air carried the faint scent of luxury perfumes, a scene unfolded that would ripple through the city's elite circles. The jewelry store, a boutique known for its exclusive designs and clientele of the ultra-wealthy, was a haven of polished elegance. Its owner, a meticulous man named Victor, had built a reputation for discretion, catering to the whims of the rich and powerful while maintaining an air of quiet authority. On this particular day, however, the tranquility of his store was shattered by an incident that would soon become the talk of the town. The millionaire in question, Charles Wentworth, was a man whose name commanded attention. A real estate tycoon with a sprawling empire of high-rise buildings and luxury estates, he was known for his sharp business acumen and an equally sharp temper. At 45, he cut an imposing figure, tall, broad-shouldered, with a tailored suit that accentuated his wealth and a smile that could charm or intimidate, depending on his mood. His pregnant wife, Eleanor, was a striking woman in her early 30s, her beauty softened by the gentle swell of her pregnancy. She carried herself with grace, her dark hair swept into an elegant updo, her eyes sharp but weary, as if she sensed a storm brewing beneath her husband's polished exterior. The couple had entered the store together, ostensibly to browse for a gift. Eleanor, now 6 months pregnant, had hoped the outing would be a rare moment of connection with Charles, whose attention had grown increasingly distant. Their marriage, once a fairy tale splashed across society pages, had frayed in recent years. Rumors of Charles's infidelity had begun to circulate, whispered in the private dining rooms of exclusive clubs and at charity galas where Eleanor still played the part of the devoted wife. She had heard the names, models, socialites, even a young actress, but had chosen to ignore them, clinging to the hope that the birth of their child might mend what was broken. Inside the store, Victor greeted them with his usual deference, guiding them toward a display of diamond necklaces that sparkled like captured starlight. The air was thick with tension, though, as Charles's phone buzzed incessantly, his attention drifting to the screen rather than the jewels before them. Eleanor, trying to maintain the facade of normalcy, pointed to a delicate pendant, its centerpiece of flawless sapphire. "What do you think, Charles?" she asked, her voice soft but tinged with a plea for his engagement. He barely glanced up, muttering something noncommittal before stepping away to take a call. It was then that the atmosphere shifted. The store's door chimed, and a woman entered, a vision in a form-fitting red dress that seemed designed to draw every eye. She was Isabella, Charles's mistress, though her presence in this moment was a brazen act even by her standards. At 28, she was a former model who had transitioned into a nebulous career as an influencer, her social media filled with images of private jets and designer handbags, many of which were rumored to be gifts from Charles. Her dark eyes locked onto Charles with a possessive glint, and she moved toward him with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, ignoring Eleanor entirely. Victor's practiced smile faltered as he sensed the brewing conflict. He had seen many dramas unfold among his clientele, discreet affairs, whispered arguments, but this was different. Isabella's arrival was no accident. It was a calculated move, a power play in a game only she seemed to understand. She approached Charles, her voice low and sultry, asking about a bracelet she had seen in the store's catalog. Charles, caught off guard, stammered a response, his eyes darting toward Eleanor, who stood frozen, her hand still resting on the glass case. Eleanor's face paled, her fingers tightening around the edge of the counter. She had suspected Charles's infidelity, but to see it so blatantly displayed, here, in a place meant to symbolize their shared life, cut deeper than any rumor. Charles, she said, her voice trembling but firm, who is this? The question hung in the air, heavy with accusation. Isabella smirked, her gaze flicking to Eleanor's rounded belly with a trace of disdain. Oh, darling, she said, her tone dripping with condescension, you must be the wife. The words were a match to dry tinder. Charles, his face flushing with a mix of anger and embarrassment, stepped between the two women, his voice low but sharp. Eleanor, Don't make a scene, he hissed, his hand gripping her arm. But Eleanor, her composure fraying, pulled away, her voice rising. A scene. You're the one parading her in front of me. The argument escalated quickly, their voices drawing the attention of the store's other patrons, who pretended to browse while stealing glances at the unfolding drama. Victor, ever the professional, moved to intervene, suggesting they take the discussion to a private room. But Charles, his temper flaring, shoved Eleanor, gently at first, then with enough force to make her stumble. She caught herself against a display case, her hand protectively cradling her belly. The room fell silent, the only sound the faint hum of the air conditioning and the rapid beat of Eleanor's heart. Victor, his face a mask of controlled outrage, wasted no time. He pressed a discreet button beneath the counter, signaling security and alerting the police. Isabella, sensing the tide turning, tried to slip away, but Victor's sharp gaze pinned her in place. Miss, I suggest you stay, he said, his voice calm but unyielding. He had noticed something, a bracelet on Isabella's wrist, a custom piece from his store, one Charles had purchased just weeks earlier. It was a damning detail, a tangible link to the affair that could no longer be denied. Victor, with years of experience reading the subtleties of his clients' lives, knew this bracelet was no mere trinket, it was evidence, a symbol of betrayal that could unravel Charles's carefully curated image. The police arrived swiftly, their presence drawing gasps from the onlookers outside the store. Eleanor, still shaken but composed, recounted the incident, her voice steady as she described Charles's shove and Isabella's provocations. Charles, his charm replaced by a defensive scowl, insisted it was a misunderstanding, that Eleanor had overreacted. But Isabella's bracelet, gleaming under the store's lights, told a different story. Victor, with a quiet authority, pointed it out to the officers, explaining its origin and its significance. The police took note, seizing the bracelet as evidence of Charles's infidelity and potential motive in the altercation. As Charles was questioned, Eleanor stood apart, her hand still on her belly, her eyes distant but resolute. She had spent years preserving the illusion of their marriage, but this moment, public, humiliating, undeniable, had shattered it. The bracelet, a gift meant for another woman, was now a weapon in her hands, a piece of evidence that could shift the balance in any future legal battle. The police, after taking statements, released Charles with a warning, but the damage was done. The story spread like wildfire, fueled by whispers on social media and breathless reports in the tabloids. For Victor, the incident was a reminder of the fragile egos and tangled lives behind the wealth he served. He had seen many scandals, but this one, marked by betrayal, violence, and the quiet strength of a pregnant woman, left an indelible mark. Eleanor, though shaken, left the store with a newfound resolve, her steps steady as she walked into a future she would now shape on her own terms. Charles, meanwhile, faced the unraveling of his empire, his reputation tarnished by a single moment of reckless anger. And Isabella, stripped of her bracelet and her bravado, faded into the background, a footnote in a story that was no longer hers to control. The jewelry store, once a sanctuary of luxury, had become the stage for a drama that would echo far beyond its walls, a testament to the power of truth in the face of betrayal. The jewelry store was a glittering sanctuary of wealth, its glass cases filled with diamonds that sparkled under carefully angled lights. The air was thick with the scent of polished metal and the quiet hum of exclusivity. It was here, in this opulent setting, that the drama unfolded, a scene so chaotic it could have been scripted for a tabloid headline. The millionaire, a man whose name was synonymous with power and privilege, had entered the store with his pregnant wife, a woman whose grace and poise were overshadowed only by the weight of her unborn child. But what began as a routine visit to select a piece of jewelry spiraled into a public spectacle that would unravel secrets, expose betrayals, and turn a glittering gift into damning evidence. The couple's arrival at the store had drawn attention immediately. The millionaire, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, exuded the kind of confidence that comes with unchecked wealth. His wife, radiant despite the visible strain of her pregnancy, moved with a quiet dignity, her hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. The store owner, a seasoned professional accustomed to catering to the elite, greeted them warmly, sensing a high-value sale. But the atmosphere shifted almost instantly when the millionaire's demeanor turned cold, his eyes darting toward a display case filled with necklaces, one of which, a diamond-encrusted pendant, seemed to hold his attention far more than his wife's presence. The tension between the couple was palpable, though the wife tried to maintain a facade of calm. She pointed out a delicate bracelet, her voice soft but hopeful, perhaps seeking to bridge the growing distance between them. The millionaire barely acknowledged her, his focus locked on the pendant. It was an extravagant piece, its centerpiece a rare gem that caught the light in a way that seemed to mesmerize him. The store owner, sensing an opportunity, began to describe its craftsmanship, but the millionaire cut him off, demanding to see it up close. His wife's face fell, her attempt at connection dismissed without a second thought. What happened next was as shocking as it was swift. As the store owner retrieved the pendant, the millionaire's impatience seemed to boil over. His wife, perhaps sensing his distraction, reached out to touch his arm, a small gesture meant to ground him. But he recoiled, and in a moment of startling aggression, he pushed her, hard enough to make her stumble. The store went silent, the only sound the faint clatter of a display case as she caught herself against it. Her eyes widened in shock, her hand instinctively clutching her belly as if to shield the life within. The store owner froze, the pendant still in his hands, while the few other customers in the shop turned to stare, their whispers barely audible but heavy with judgment. The millionaire's face was a mask of fleeting regret, quickly replaced by a defensive scowl. "Don't make a scene," he hissed, his voice low but cutting. His wife, tears welling in her eyes, straightened herself, her dignity battered but intact. She said nothing, but the weight of her silence spoke volumes. The store owner, recovering from his shock, set the pendant down and reached for the phone. "I'm calling the police," he said firmly, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. The millionaire's expression darkened, but he didn't protest. Perhaps he knew the futility of arguing, or perhaps he was already calculating how to spin the narrative in his favor. The police arrived quickly, their presence transforming the boutique into a stage for a very public reckoning. The officers, a seasoned pair accustomed to domestic disputes, took statements from the wife, the store owner, and the handful of witnesses who had lingered to watch the drama unfold. The wife's voice trembled as she recounted the push, her words measured but laced with pain. She didn't accuse her husband outright, but her description of his behavior, his distraction, his coldness, and the sudden violence, painted a damning picture. The millionaire, for his part, tried to downplay the incident, claiming it was an accident, a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. But the witnesses corroborated the wife's account, and the store's security footage, which the owner promptly offered to the police, left little room for doubt. As the officers reviewed the footage, the millionaire's carefully constructed facade began to crack. The video showed not only the push but also his fixation on the pendant, a fixation that seemed to consume him even as his wife stood beside him, vulnerable and ignored. The police, sensing there was more to the story, began to probe deeper. Why was the pendant so important? Why had he reacted so viscerally to his wife's touch? The answers began to emerge when the store owner, still shaken but cooperative, revealed a crucial detail. The millionaire had been in the store just days earlier, accompanied not by his wife but by another woman, a strikingly beautiful figure who had left with a similar pendant around her neck. The revelation hit like a thunderbolt. The pendant, it turned out, was not meant for the millionaire's wife but for his mistress, a woman whose existence had been a closely guarded secret until that moment. The store owner, who prided himself on discretion, admitted that he hadn't thought much of it at the time. Wealthy men often bought gifts for women who weren't their wives. But now, with the police involved and the wife's tear-streaked face in front of him, the gift took on a new significance. It was no longer just a piece of jewelry, It was evidence of infidelity, a tangible symbol of betrayal that had pushed the millionaire to lash out when his worlds collided. The police seized the pendant from the display case, noting its serial number and matching it to the receipt from the millionaire's earlier visit. The paperwork confirmed that he had purchased an identical piece for an unnamed woman, paid for in cash to avoid a paper trail. But the store's meticulous records, combined with the security footage, provided a clear link to the mistress. The officers questioned the millionaire further, their tone growing sharper as he stumbled over his explanations. He claimed the earlier purchase was for a business associate, a token of appreciation for a deal well closed. But the lie was flimsy, and the police weren't buying it. They informed him that the pendant, along with the footage, would be entered as evidence in a potential assault case against him, and they advised his wife to consider pressing charges. The wife, however, remained silent, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. She was humiliated, betrayed, and physically shaken, yet there was a flicker of resolve in her eyes. She declined to make a statement about charges on the spot, asking instead for time to process what had happened. The police respected her request but urged her to seek medical attention, given her pregnancy. As they escorted the millionaire out of the store in handcuffs, a precautionary measure, they said, pending further investigation, the wife stood alone, her gaze fixed on the pendant still lying on the counter. It was a beautiful thing, cold and lifeless, a stark contrast to the life growing inside her. In the days that followed, the incident became fodder for gossip columns and social media, with posts on X speculating about the millionaire's motives and the identity of the mistress. Some painted the wife as a victim, others as a scorned woman plotting revenge. The truth, as always, was more complex. The wife, whose name was withheld from early reports to protect her privacy, began to piece together the fragments of her husband's double life. She hired a private investigator, who uncovered a trail of financial transactions linking the millionaire to his mistress, a woman who, it turned out, had been a fixture in his life for years, hidden in plain sight. The pendant was just one of many gifts, each more extravagant than the last, funded by accounts the wife had never known existed. The mistress, when confronted, showed no remorse. She claimed the millionaire had promised to leave his wife, that the pendant was a symbol of their future together. But the evidence told a different story, one of manipulation and deceit, with the millionaire playing both women against each other to maintain his control. The wife, armed with this new knowledge, began to take steps to protect herself and her unborn child. She froze joint accounts, consulted a divorce lawyer, and moved into a separate residence, her resolve hardening with each passing day. The pendant, meanwhile, remained in police custody, its sparkling facets now a grim reminder of a marriage shattered by betrayal. The millionaire faced mounting legal troubles, not just for the assault but for potential financial improprieties uncovered during the investigation. The store owner, hailed as a hero for his quick thinking, became an unlikely celebrity, his shop now a pilgrimage site for those fascinated by the scandal. And the wife, once a quiet figure in the shadow of her husband's wealth, emerged as a symbol of resilience, her story a testament to the strength found in the face of heartbreak. The pendant, once a mistress's prize, had become the key to her liberation.